Have you ever wondered why everything feels more expensive every single year? Why your salary doesn't really feel like it grows, but your grocery bill, your rent, your daily expenses keep climbing higher and higher? You might think it's just inflation, or simply how the economy works. But behind all of this, there is a powerful institution quietly shaping your financial reality every single day. It's called the Federal Reserve, and the strange truth is, most people don't fully understand what it is or how deeply it affects their life. The Federal Reserve, or simply the Fed, is the central bank of the United States. But don't let that name confuse you, because even if you don't live in America, its decisions still ripple across the entire global economy, including your country, your city, and even your personal wallet. Now here's the key idea. The Federal Reserve doesn't control your money directly, but it controls something far more powerful. It controls the cost of money itself. Think about that for a moment. Money is not just paper or numbers in your bank account. Money is something people borrow, lend, and circulate. So when money becomes cheap to borrow, people and businesses spend more freely. But when money becomes expensive to borrow, everything slows down very quickly. And this is where the Fed quietly steps in. It adjusts something called interest rates. Now imagine interest rates like the price tag of borrowing money. If that price goes up, loans become expensive. Home loans, car loans, business loans, credit cards, everything becomes harder to manage. If that price goes down, borrowing becomes easy, even tempting. And without realizing it, your entire lifestyle starts shifting based on these invisible decisions. But the real power of the Fed is not just in interest rates, it's in how those decisions shape your job, your savings, and your future plans. When interest rates go up, companies slow down hiring. They cut costs, delay expansion, and become cautious. When rates go down, companies expand aggressively. They hire more, invest more, and take bigger risks. So whether you get a job offer, a promotion, or even a layoff, it may not only be about your performance, it may also be part of a much bigger economic wave created far away in a room full of policymakers and economists. And here's the most interesting part. Most people never connect these dots. They think, I'm struggling because of my situation or my skills, but in reality, they are living inside a system that is constantly being adjusted like a giant invisible control panel. And the Federal Reserve is one of the main hands operating that panel. Now you might be thinking, why does such a system even exist? To understand that, we need to go deeper into how money actually works and why inflation never really disappears. And that's where things get more surprising, because the Fed doesn't just react to the economy, it actively shapes the direction of the economy before most people even feel the change. Imagine the economy like a giant engine. If it moves too slowly, jobs are lost, businesses struggle, opportunities shrink. If it moves too fast, prices rise quickly, money loses value, and everything becomes expensive. So the Federal Reserve tries to control this balance, like adjusting the speed of that engine. But here's the catch. The tools it uses are powerful, but not perfect. One small change in interest rates can affect millions of people at the same time. If rates rise too quickly, borrowing stops, people delay homes, businesses cancel plans, investors panic. If rates stay too low for too long, money becomes too easy, and prices start rising uncontrollably. That is inflation. And inflation is not just a number on the news. It directly affects your daily life. Food becomes more expensive, rent increases, savings lose value over time. Even if your salary increases, it often doesn't increase fast enough to match rising prices. So it feels like you are running, but staying in the same place. And this creates a silent pressure in everyday life. But the influence doesn't stop there, because interest rates don't just affect loans and inflation, they also affect global money flow. Investors around the world always search for the safest place to put their money. So when US interest rates rise, global investors move their money into the US. This strengthens the dollar, but weakens other currencies worldwide. And when the dollar becomes stronger, imports, fuel, technology, and food chains become more expensive elsewhere. So a decision made in one country can influence prices in another country thousands of miles away. Most people never see this connection. They just feel prices rising without knowing why. But now you can start seeing the pattern. Nothing is completely random. Everything is connected through systems, policies, and financial flow. And the Federal Reserve sits at the center of one of the most powerful systems in the world. But here's something important. This is not about conspiracy. The Fed is not targeting individuals. It is trying to stabilize an entire economy of millions of people. But in doing so, the effects naturally reach your personal life. That's the paradox. A system built for stability creates uncertainty at the individual level. So what does this mean for you? It means awareness is power. When you understand how these cycles work, you stop reacting emotionally to money changes and start thinking more strategically. You understand why timing matters, why saving matters in certain periods, and why borrowing can be risky at others. You start seeing patterns instead of confusion, and most importantly, you stop feeling like everything is random. Because once you see the system, you don't feel controlled by it in the same way. Instead, you learn to move with it, and that changes everything. In the next part, we'll go deeper into how these decisions shape global power, technology growth, and your long-term financial future. But for now, just remember this: the world is not random. It only feels random until you understand the system behind it.
America has one of the largest economies in the world. Trillions of dollars move through the country every year. Major companies continue making billions in profit. Stock markets recover. Inflation numbers slowly improve. And yet, millions of Americans still feel financially exhausted. People are working full-time jobs and still struggling to survive. Some are cutting back on groceries. Others are delaying healthcare. Many are drowning in debt. So what is really happening? If inflation is slowing down, why does life still feel unaffordable? The answer lies in something deeper than inflation itself. Because the real problem is not only that prices went up, it is that modern life became structurally expensive. For decades, Americans were told a simple formula: work hard, get educated, build a career, and eventually you will live comfortably. But for many people today, that promise feels broken. One major reason is wages. Although incomes increased in some industries, they often failed to keep pace with the rapid rise in living costs. A small salary increase sounds good until rent rises even faster. Imagine earning 5% more money while your housing, food, insurance, and transportation costs rise by 15%. Technically, you are earning more. But realistically, you are losing purchasing power. And this happened across large parts of America. Housing became one of the biggest financial burdens. In many cities, rent prices exploded after the pandemic. Demand increased. Supply stayed limited. Investors bought properties aggressively, and mortgage rates climbed sharply. Suddenly, even middle-class Americans found themselves spending massive portions of income just to keep a roof over their heads. Some people now spend over half their salary on housing alone. That leaves little room for savings, emergencies, or future planning. And when people cannot build financial security, they begin living in survival mode. But housing is only one piece of the problem. Transportation also became expensive. Car prices increased dramatically. Insurance rates rose. Gas prices fluctuated constantly. Repairs became more costly. In many American cities, owning a car is not optional. People need vehicles simply to work. So transportation became another unavoidable financial pressure. Then there is healthcare, one of the most stressful parts of American life. Even insured families can face huge medical bills. Deductibles remain high. Emergency treatments can create financial disaster overnight. Many people fear getting sick, not only because of health concerns, but because of what it might cost financially. That fear changes how people live. Some avoid doctor visits, some delay medication, some ignore health problems until they become severe. Financial stress and health stress become connected. And perhaps the most dangerous part is this: people are no longer struggling temporarily. Many feel permanently stuck. Credit card debt reached alarming levels in recent years because people increasingly relied on borrowing just to maintain normal living standards. Groceries became more expensive, utilities rose, everyday necessities consumed larger portions of income, and because interest rates also increased, debt became harder to escape. A growing number of Americans now live in a constant cycle: work, pay bills, pay debt, repeat, without meaningful financial progress. This creates emotional burnout, especially among younger generations. Millennials and Gen Z entered adulthood during periods of economic instability, rising costs, student loan burdens, and housing crises. For many of them, the traditional American dream feels more like an unreachable fantasy. Owning a home? Difficult. Raising children comfortably? Expensive. Saving for retirement? Often impossible. And social media makes everything feel worse. Every day, people are exposed to luxury lifestyles online, expensive vacations, designer products, beautiful apartments, perfect routines. But behind many of those images are sponsorships, debt, editing, or unrealistic portrayals of life. Still, comparison affects mental health. People begin feeling like they are failing financially, even when they are trying their best. This emotional pressure is becoming a serious issue across society. Because financial insecurity affects more than money, it affects relationships, sleep, confidence, mental health, and long-term hope. Many Americans today feel like no matter how hard they work, stability keeps moving further away, and this feeling damages trust in institutions. People start questioning governments, corporations, economic systems, even education itself. Because if working hard no longer guarantees stability, then what exactly are people working toward? At the same time, corporations continue reporting strong profits. That contrast creates anger. Workers see executives receiving bonuses, while ordinary families struggle with groceries and rent. Whether fair or unfair, many people believe the economy increasingly rewards wealth while punishing ordinary workers. This perception fuels frustration across political and social lines. And unlike short-term inflation spikes, structural affordability problems cannot be solved quickly. Lower inflation alone does not suddenly make homes affordable again. It does not erase debt. It does not reduce years of financial stress overnight. This is why many Americans still feel broke, even when economists say conditions are improving. Because emotionally and financially, many people never fully recovered from the economic shock. And perhaps the biggest lesson from all this is simple: a strong economy on paper does not always create a secure life for ordinary people. Statistics can improve, markets can rise, but if daily life remains financially exhausting, public frustration will continue growing. And until affordability truly returns to housing, healthcare, education, and everyday essentials, millions of Americans will continue asking the same question: if the economy is doing better, why does life still feel so hard? For years, inflation dominated headlines in America. Prices surged across nearly every part of daily life. Food became expensive. Rent increased, gas prices jumped, utilities rose. Families across the country felt the pressure immediately. Then eventually, inflation began slowing down. Economists called it progress. News channels described it as recovery. Government officials pointed to improving numbers as proof the economy was stabilizing. But ordinary Americans had a very different reaction. Because despite all the positive headlines, many people still felt financially trapped. And that raises an important question. If inflation is falling, why do Americans still feel broke? The answer begins with a misunderstanding many people have about inflation itself. When inflation falls, prices usually do not go back to old levels. They simply stop rising as fast. That means if groceries became dramatically more expensive over the past few years, those higher prices often remain. People are still paying far more than they used to. And that reality affects millions of households every single day. Take groceries as an example. Before inflation surged, families could buy weekly essentials at manageable prices. But after years of rising costs, supermarket bills became noticeably larger. Even if inflation slows today, people still remember when food was significantly cheaper. And psychologically, that matters. Humans compare prices to memory. not to economic reports. If someone feels like their paycheck buys less than before, they will feel financially weaker regardless of what economists say. Housing tells a similar story. America's housing market became painfully expensive in recent years. Rent prices climbed sharply in many cities. Home ownership became increasingly difficult, especially for younger adults. Mortgage rates also increased significantly. That combination created enormous pressure. For many families, housing alone now consumes a massive portion of monthly income. And once basic shelter becomes financially stressful, everything else becomes stressful too. People cut spending elsewhere, delay savings, postpone future plans. Some even move back with family because independent living feels unaffordable. Healthcare adds another layer to the problem. The United States already had some of the world's highest medical costs. Inflation only intensified financial anxiety around healthcare. Insurance premiums remained high. Prescription drugs stayed expensive. Emergency medical situations continued frightening millions of families. Many Americans live with a constant fear that one accident or illness could destroy their finances. That fear creates emotional exhaustion. And emotional exhaustion is now becoming a major part of economic life in America. Because financial pressure is no longer occasional for many people, it feels permanent. Workers across different industries continue reporting the same experience. They work hard, but never seem to move forward. A salary increase disappears into rent increases, grocery bills, insurance payments, debt interest, transportation costs. Everything competes for income at the same time. And debt plays a huge role here. During periods of high inflation, many Americans relied heavily on credit cards just to maintain everyday living standards. But later, higher interest rates made those debts even more painful. Now millions of people spend large portions of income simply paying interest, not reducing debt, not building wealth, just surviving. Student loans also returned as a major burden for millions of borrowers. For younger generations especially, debt became part of adult life almost immediately after education. And when debt combines with expensive housing and unstable living costs, long-term financial optimism disappears. This is one reason younger Americans increasingly feel disconnected from the traditional American dream. Older generations often describe periods when homes felt affordable, education costs were lower, and single incomes could support families more easily. Many young adults today cannot imagine that reality. To them, economic survival itself feels expensive, and social media quietly intensifies these emotions. Online platforms constantly display luxury lifestyles, expensive travel, beautiful apartments, designer products, and successful lives. Even when much of it is curated or financially unrealistic, it shapes public psychology. People begin feeling left behind. They compare their struggles to someone else's highlight reel. And over time, that comparison creates frustration, insecurity, and hopelessness. At the same time, corporations continue reporting massive profits. That contrast angers many workers. People see companies increasing prices while ordinary families struggle harder than before. This creates a growing belief that the economic system benefits large corporations more than average citizens. Whether fully accurate or not, perception matters. Because public trust shapes how people feel about the economy. And right now, trust is fragile. Many Americans no longer believe financial stability is guaranteed through hard work alone. That belief shift may be one of the most important economic changes happening today. Because once people lose confidence in upward mobility, frustration spreads quickly across society. And this explains why falling inflation alone cannot instantly repair public confidence. Economic recovery is not only about numbers, it is about whether people feel secure enough to breathe again financially. Can they pay bills comfortably? Can they save money? Can they imagine a stable future? For millions of Americans, those answers still feel uncertain. That is why the economy can technically improve while public frustration remains high. Because people are not measuring life through government statistics, they are measuring it through daily experience. And until ordinary Americans truly feel relief in housing, healthcare, groceries, and debt, many will continue feeling broke even in a better economy. Because surviving is not the same as thriving. And right now, Millions of Americans feel like they are only surviving. So maybe the real issue is not whether inflation is falling, but whether ordinary people can finally afford to live without constant financial stress. And for millions of Americans, that moment still feels far away. What do you think? Is the economy truly recovering, or are people just learning how to survive a more expensive life? Let me know your thoughts below.